The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council sparkled with floating lights and strange alien technology. Ambassador Tom Miller stood straight and tall, trying to hide how impressed he was by everything around him. He was the first human to ever stand in this room, and he wasn't going to show any weakness. "So," spoke the tall, blue-skinned alien at the center of the council table, "you humans think you're ready to join the galactic community." Its voice carried a hint of amusement, like an adult talking to a child who claimed they could drive a car. Tom cleared his throat. "Yes, Council Leader. Earth has achieved faster than light travel, established 3 colony worlds, and developed clean energy technology. We believe we meet all requirements for membership." Laughter erupted around the room. Not polite chuckles, but real, stomach-holding laughter. Some aliens were even wiping tears from their eyes, or what Tom assumed were eyes. "You call that an achievement?" Another council member asked between laughs. This one looked like a walking crystal. "Our youngest species master these technologies before they even leave their home systems." Tom felt his face getting hot, but he kept his diplomatic smile. "We're aware we might be behind in some areas, but humans are quick learners." Quick learners. A red-skinned alien waved what looked like a tentacle. "Your species needed environmental suits to visit the garden world of Proxima B. Even our children can breathe there naturally." More laughter filled the room. Tom's smile was starting to hurt his face. The council leader held up a hand for quiet. "Perhaps we should review the human application more thoroughly." It tapped a glowing screen. "Let's see. Planet of origin. Earth. Sol system. Spiral arm." Its voice trailed off. The alien's purple eyes widened. The laughter in the room died instantly. "There must be some mistake," the council leader whispered. "Computer, verify planet classification for Earth, Sol system." A robotic voice filled the chamber. "Earth. TLA certification. Level 8 HELWOR. Body. Gravity. Extreme. Atmospheric composition. Highly toxic to 80% of Ninhobun species. Temperature range. Lethal. Wildlife. Extremely dangerous. Natural disasters. Frequent and severe." The silence in the room became so deep that Tom could hear his own heartbeat. Every alien was staring at him now, but not with amusement. Their expressions showed fear, disbelief, and respect. "You?" The crystal alien's voice shook. "You evolved on a level 8 world. Is that important?" Tom asked, genuinely confused. Earth was just Earth. Sure, it had its challenges, but it was home. Important. The red-skinned alien's tentacles were trembling. "Most intelligent life evolves on level 2 or 3 worlds. Level 4 is considered harsh. Level 5 is nearly uninhabitable. And you're from a level 8. Tom remembered his first trip to an alien world now. He'd thought the environmental suit was just standard procedure. But now he recalled how the alien guides had praised the perfect conditions of their world. Conditions that humans found uncomfortably hot, with air too thin to breathe properly. The council leader stood up slowly. "Ambassador Miller, you say humans have already established 3 colony worlds." "Yes," Tom nodded. "Though we had some trouble with the environmental conditions being too mild. We had to artificially increase the gravity and adjust the atmosphere to make them more livable." A sound like choking came from several council members. "Too mild." The crystal alien's voice cracked. "Well, yes," Tom explained. "The low gravity was making our children's bones develop too weakly, and the lack of natural disasters meant the emergency response teams weren't getting enough practice. We had to install artificial weather systems to create proper storms and earthquakes." The council leader sat down heavily. "Ambassador Miller, I believe we need to reassess our initial evaluation of humanity's application. Would you mind stepping outside while we confer?" As Tom left the chamber, he heard urgent whispers behind him. He couldn't understand why everyone was so shocked. Earth was just normal, wasn't it? Sure, they had to be careful about a few things like volcanoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, toxic plants, and dangerous animals, but that was just part of daily life. He checked his phone while waiting. Back home, his daughter was preparing for her school's annual survival camping trip in the Australian outback. He smiled, remembering his own childhood adventures. Maybe he'd tell the council about those next time. Though judging by their reactions today, perhaps he should keep Earth's more exciting aspects to himself for now. The Galactic Science Academy was in chaos. Chief Researcher Brill, a tall alien with silver skin that sparkled under the floating lights, stared at the readings on his screen for the 20th time. His assistant kept bringing more data, and each new piece of information made things worse. "This can't be right," Brill muttered, his three eyes blinking rapidly. No species could evolve in these conditions. Jack Stone, the human scientific liaison, sat in a corner of the lab, calmly sipping his morning coffee. He watched with amusement as the alien scientists rushed around, checking and double-checking their instruments. The gravity alone should have crushed them. One scientist shouted, waving his tentacles at a display showing Earth's gravitational pull. 1G is more than double what any normal species needs. "Forget gravity," another scientist called out, her crystalline body glowing with stress. "Look at the temperature variations. Their world switches between freezing and boiling multiple times in a single rotation." Jack took another sip of his coffee, remembering how his grandmother used to complain about Boston's weather changing 4 times in one day. He'd never thought it was anything special. "Sir," a junior researcher burst into the room. "We've confirmed the atmospheric analysis. Their air is over 20% oxygen." The room fell silent. Every alien turned to stare at Jack, who was still enjoying his coffee. That's impossible," Brill whispered. "Oxygen is highly toxic at those levels. It should have caused their cells to break down. Their planet should be experiencing constant fires." Jack shrugged. "We do get forest fires sometimes. That's why we have firefighters." "You fight fire?" A scientist's color changed from green to pale white. "Directly." "Sure," Jack nodded. "Men and women go right in there with protective gear. It's a respected profession back home." Brill turned back to his screens, adding more data. "Let's see. Regular seismic activity, massive storm systems, thousands of venomous species, and you said humans live on every continent." "Except Antarctica," Jack replied. "Though we do have research stations there, it's a bit chilly." "A bit chilly." Brill checked the readings. "The temperature there drops to levels that would shatter most species' cellular structure." Jack finished his coffee and stood up. As he did, several aliens stepped back nervously. He walked to the drink synthesizer in the corner, pressed a few buttons, and waited as it created another cup of steaming coffee. "Is that heated water with stimulants?" a scientist asked, watching in horror. "Coffee," Jack smiled. "Want to try some?" The aliens looked at the dark liquid as if it might jump out and attack them. The smell alone made 2 of them back away further. "You willingly drink hot poison?" Brill asked, fascinated despite his fear. "Poison," Jack laughed. "This is mild compared to some drinks back home. You should see what we call energy drinks. Or better yet, try our spicy foods." "Spicy foods?" A researcher quickly typed this into their database. Their eyes widened. "You mean you eat plants that developed chemical weapons, and you do it for pleasure?" Jack nodded, enjoying their reactions. "Some people even compete to eat the spiciest peppers. My brother once tried a Carolina Reaper. Couldn't feel his tongue for 2 days, but he won the contest." Brill sat down heavily in his hover chair. "So let me understand this correctly. Your species evolved on a high-gravity death world with toxic atmosphere, extreme temperatures, constant natural disasters, and dangerous wildlife. And then you started eating the dangerous things for fun." "Pretty much," Jack smiled. "Though you forgot to mention the earthquakes, volcanoes, and hurricanes. Those keep life interesting. The room fell silent again, broken only by the sound of Jack sipping his coffee. Finally, Brill spoke, his voice shaking slightly. "I need to update our research protocols," he said. "Clearly, our definition of survivable conditions needs revision. And perhaps we should reconsider our classification of humans as a primitive species." Jack just smiled. He couldn't wait to tell them about extreme sports. Commander Pete Roberts stood in the Galactic Defense Force Training Center, watching as alien soldiers struggled to move in the simulation chamber. The gravity had been set to Earth normal levels, just 1 g, but most of the alien troops could barely stand. "This is impossible," complained a tall, blue-skinned warrior, trying to lift his training weapon. "No one can fight in these conditions." Pete smiled and stepped into the chamber. He wasn't wearing any powered armor or support systems, just standard Earth military fatigues. The aliens watched in amazement as he moved normally, even doing a few jumping jacks to warm up. "Would anyone like to try some basic combat training?" he asked. The alien soldiers looked at each other nervously. Finally, one stepped forward, a creature that looked like a cross between a cat and a lizard. "I volunteer," it said, "but please activate my strength-enhancing armor first." "Of course," Pete nodded. He turned to the control room. "Set gravity to 1.2 g for a proper workout." The alien troops gasped. Their commander, General Vix, stepped forward. "That's madness. You'll kill him." Pete shook his head. "This is how we train on Earth. Sometimes we go up to 1.5 g for Special Forces training." The alien volunteer was now wearing powered combat armor that whirred and hummed with each movement. Pete stood across from him in nothing but his uniform. The training room computer counted down. "Beginning combat exercise in 3, 2, 1. What happened next made every alien in the room question their understanding of physics. Pete moved like lightning, easily dodging the armored aliens' attacks. His movements were smooth and natural, while his opponent struggled with each step despite the powered assistance. After 3 minutes, Pete had disarmed his opponent 5 times. "How?" the alien warrior gasped, his armor's cooling systems working overtime. "Your bones should be breaking under this pressure." Pete helped him up. "Actually, human bones are so dense that your medical scanners originally mistook them for artificial reinforcement. We evolved this way to survive Earth's gravity." General Vix was rapidly taking notes. "And all humans are like this." "More or less," Pete shrugged. "Though some are stronger. Wait until you meet our heavy worlders, humans who grew up in Earth's high-gravity regions." The general's writing pad clattered to the floor. "There are regions with even higher gravity on Earth." "Sure," Pete smiled. "Ever heard of Olympic weightlifting? Normal humans lifting hundreds of kilos for sport." The training room erupted in shocked whispers. One alien officer fainted. "Let's try something else," Pete suggested. He walked to a nearby equipment rack and picked up a standard-issue backpack. "This is what our regular soldiers carry on long marches. Would anyone like to try it?" Several aliens stepped forward, eager to prove themselves. Their confidence lasted until they tried to lift the pack. "What's in this?" one demanded. "It weighs as much as a small vehicle." "Just basic supplies," Pete explained. "Water, food, ammunition, medical kit, camping gear. Standard stuff for a 3-day patrol." General Vix was now staring at Pete with a mixture of fear and respect. "Commander Roberts, I need to know, how long can a human soldier operate in these conditions?" "Well, our record for continuous combat operations is about 2 weeks, but with proper supplies and rotation, we can maintain a campaign indefinitely." The room fell silent. Pete could almost see the calculations happening in their heads. What it meant to have soldiers who treated high-gravity combat as normal, who could fight for weeks without powered assistance, whose very bones were stronger than most combat armor. "One more question," General Vix said quietly. "These heavy worlders you mentioned, would they be willing to train our special forces?" Pete grinned. I'll make some calls. But first, who's up for some hand-to-hand combat practice? Don't worry, I'll go easy on you. The aliens looked at each other, then at Pete, then at the gravity readout still showing 1.2 G. Nobody volunteered. Sometimes. They were learning. Discretion was the better part of valor, especially when dealing with humans. The emergency alarms woke Captain Mark Webber at 300 hours. Red lights flashed throughout the human embassy on the Galactic Council station as reports flooded in. Pirates had attacked 3 frontier colonies. These weren't the usual raiders. These pirates had heavy weapons and warships. Status report. Mark barked as he rushed into the emergency command center. The room was already filled with both human and alien emergency coordinators. A blue-skinned alien named Trill looked up from his console, his face pale. It's bad, Captain. The colony worlds are experiencing severe storms. Our rescue ships can't land in these conditions. Mark looked at the weather data. Wind speeds of 120 kilometers per hour, heavy rain, and periodic lightning strikes. Back on Earth, they called it a Category 3 hurricane. Tough weather, but nothing special. How many colonists are trapped? He asked. 20,000 on each world, Trill replied. But we can't reach them until the storms pass. The atmospheric conditions are too dangerous for our ships. Mark turned to his human team. Call in the heavy weather squad and get me the storm jumpers from Australia. The alien coordinators looked confused. The what? Earth's emergency response teams, Mark explained. They're trained for this kind of weather. Actually, they usually handle worse. Within an hour, 3 human ships arrived. They were bulky, ugly vessels that looked nothing like the sleek alien rescue craft. But they were built to handle Earth's worst storms, which made them perfect for this mission. This is Storm Jumper Lead. A voice crackled over the comm. We're beginning our approach to Colony 1. The alien coordinators watched in horror as the human ships dove straight into the storm. Lightning flashed around them. Wind buffeted their hulls, but they kept going. They're going to crash, Trill shouted. Nah, Mark smiled. This is actually pretty calm compared to cyclone season back home. The rescue operation that followed would be talked about for years in the galactic community. Human teams, wearing what the aliens considered primitive protective gear, worked tirelessly in conditions that would kill most species. Captain, one of the alien coordinators called out. Colony 2 reports toxic gas leaks in their main shelter. What kind of gas? Mark asked. Nitrogen, mixed with oxygen. Mark tried not to laugh. That's just normal air for us. Send in the teams without masks. It'll be faster. Hour after hour, the humans worked. They carried children through lightning storms, repaired structures in howling winds, and set up emergency shelters in conditions the aliens considered unsurvivable. How are they doing this? Trill asked, watching the video feeds. They're not even using powered armor. We're used to it, Mark explained. Every human emergency responder trains in conditions like this. Sometimes worse. Worse. Trill's antenna went flat against his head. What could be worse than this? Mark pulled up some training footage from Earth. This is our tornado response training. And here's volcanic evacuation practice. Oh, and this is how we handled tsunami rescue operations. Trill watched the videos with growing amazement. Your people willingly go into these conditions to save others. Of course, Mark nodded. It's what we do. After 18 hours of continuous operations, all 3 colonies were evacuated. Not a single life was lost. The human teams were tired but happy, swapping stories about their interesting day. The Galactic Council held an emergency session that evening. The main topic, immediately authorizing the creation of human emergency response teams for all major colonies. As Mark finally headed to his quarters for some sleep, he passed 2 alien officials talking quietly. Maybe, one was saying, maybe it's not such a bad thing to have these humans around, especially if you live somewhere dangerous. Somewhere dangerous. the other replied. According to them, their whole planet is more dangerous than this, and they call it home. Mark smiled to himself. If they thought this was impressive, wait until they learned about human search and rescue teams who worked in active volcanoes. The scientific expedition to Earth was the largest the Galactic Council had ever organized. 50 of the galaxy's top researchers, all wearing their most advanced protective gear, prepared to study this mysterious Level 8 HellWorld up close. Their guide was Dr. Mike Brown, who couldn't hide his amusement at their worried faces. First stop, Mike announced as their shuttle landed, is a typical Earth beach in Hawaii. The aliens stepped out carefully, their sensors whirring. One immediately screamed. The hydrogen oxide. She pointed at the ocean. It's everywhere. And it's mixed with sodium chloride. Mike nodded. We call it the Pacific Ocean. Great for swimming. Swimming. Another scientist checked his readings again. You deliberately immerse yourselves in acid. Before Mike could answer, a group of human children ran past, laughing and splashing into the waves. The alien scientists watched in horror as the kids played in the water, completely unprotected. Those younglings, a tall researcher asked, they're wearing some kind of force field. Nope, Mike smiled. Just swimsuits, though we do make them wear sunscreen. The next stop was even more shocking. A local restaurant. The aliens watched in fascination as humans casually consumed what their scanners identified as chemical weapons. He just ate a capsaicin bomb. One researcher shouted, pointing at a man enjoying his spicy curry. Oh, that's mild, Mike explained. You should see our hot sauce collection. A young woman at the next table was drinking something that made the aliens' hazard detectors go crazy. Is that fermented grain juice mixed with caffeine? A scientist asked in disbelief. Just beer and coffee, Mike nodded. Pretty normal breakfast here. The expedition's next destination was a local park, where they found more surprises. Humans were voluntarily running in the high gravity, some even carrying weights to make it harder. Children were climbing metal structures for fun, risking falls from heights that would kill most alien species. Look at their bone density, one scientist exclaimed, checking his medical scanner. It's like they're wearing internal armor. And their muscles, another added. The gravity should be crushing them, but they're playing games in it. The day's final shock came when it started to rain. The aliens rushed for cover, but humans just opened umbrellas or walked normally through the downpour. Dihydrogen monoxide is falling from the sky. A researcher panicked. Yeah, we call it rain, Mike said. Pretty nice weather today, actually. Nice. The lead scientist checked the atmospheric readings. The air pressure is crushing. The oxygen levels are toxic. The temperature variations are lethal. And you call this nice? Mike shrugged. Well, it's not too hot. No earthquakes today, and hurricane season is still months away. That evening, as the alien scientists huddled in their protected compound writing reports, they watched human news channels in amazement. Stories about extreme sports made them particularly nervous. They jump out of flying vehicles. For entertainment, one asked. And dive into deep waters, another added. Look at this one. They climb frozen mountains. The lead scientist was quickly updating his report to the council. His main conclusion: humans weren't just surviving on a death world. They were thriving on it. Their children were tougher than most species' adult warriors. Their normal activities would qualify as extreme survival training anywhere else. As he finished his report, he heard loud music from outside. Looking through the reinforced window, he saw humans having a barbecue in the park. They were cooking with fire, right out in the open, while small humans played nearby on grass that his sensors identified as multiple sharp biological weapons, which humans call the lawn. Perhaps, he wrote in his final notes, we should reconsider what we think of as impossible. These humans don't just survive here. They call it paradise. Outside, Mike was grilling hamburgers, thinking about tomorrow's expedition. He couldn't wait to show them a typical day at a local fire station. That should really give them something to write about. The Galactic Council's emergency chamber was silent as Commander Anna Wells studied the holographic display. A massive reactor on the colony world of New Haven was about to explode, threatening millions of lives. The aliens had already tried everything they could. "It's impossible," the council leader said. "The radiation levels are too high. The gravity fluctuations would crush any rescue team. And the temperature." He shook his head sadly. Anna checked the readings again. "High radiation. Sure, but no worse than cleaning up a nuclear plant back home. Gravity spikes of 3G. Tough, but manageable. Temperature of 180 degrees. Hot, but that's what cooling suits were for." "We'll do it," she said simply. Everyone stared at her. Commander Wells, a crystal-bodied council member, spoke carefully. "We've already lost 3 rescue teams. Their protection systems failed instantly. No one can survive those conditions." Anna pulled up her communicator. "This is Commander Wells. I need Team Hellfire ready in 10 minutes. Full Earth standard gear." Within minutes, 12 humans stood in the council chamber, wearing what looked to the aliens like primitive protective suits. No power armor, no force fields, just tough material designed to handle Earth's worst conditions. "The mission is simple," Anna explained to her team. "We go in, we stabilize the reactor, we get out. Just like the Fukushima cleanup, but with better equipment." The alien council members watched in disbelief as the humans checked their gear. One was even joking about how this would be easier than volcano monitoring duty. "You can't be serious," the council leader protested. "Those suits, they're not even powered." "Don't need power armor," Anna replied. "Just slows us down. Earth-grade protection is enough." The team boarded their shuttle, a sturdy vessel that looked clumsy compared to alien ships. As they approached the reactor facility, the aliens watched through video feeds, expecting disaster. Instead, they saw something incredible. The humans moved efficiently through radiation levels that should have killed them instantly. Their natural bone density and muscle strength let them function in the crushing gravity. Their Earth-evolved endurance kept them going when the heat should have stopped them. "Team 2, check those coolant lines," Anna ordered through the radio. "Team 3, get those backup generators online." "Found the problem," a voice called out. "Main control rod is stuck. Needs manual override." "Manual?" an alien technician gasped. "But the controls are in the hottest section." Anna was already moving. She reached the control room, where the temperature was high enough to melt some metals. Her cooling suit was working overtime, but she barely noticed. Growing up in Australia's outback had prepared her for worse. "Rods engaging," she reported calmly. "Reactor stabilizing." Just another day at the office. Within 2 hours, the crisis was over. The humans emerged from the facility tired but alive, joking about needing a cold beer. The aliens' medical scanners went crazy trying to understand how they had survived. "Your radiation exposure," one doctor said, checking readings. "It's healing." "Yeah." Anna nodded. "Humans have pretty good radiation resistance. Natural adaptation from Earth's background radiation. We heal fast, too." The council leader approached her, still stunned. "Commander Wells, you and your team just did something we thought was impossible. How can we repay you?" Anna thought for a moment. "Well, we noticed some volcanoes on the northern continent that looked interesting. Would you mind if we set up a research station there? Been a while since our geologists had some real excitement." The aliens stared at her, then at each other. These humans had just survived conditions that killed their best teams, and now they wanted to study active volcanoes for fun. The council leader just nodded weakly. He was beginning to understand why humans called their deadly homeworld beautiful and exciting. Perhaps, he thought, being from a HellWorld wasn't such a bad thing after all. 1 year after Earth's first contact with the Galactic Council, the Grand Chamber looked very different. Where once aliens had laughed at the human delegation, Now they stood in respectful attention as Ambassador Tom Miller walked to the central podium. The same council members who had mocked humanity's achievements now wore special badges, marking them as worlds under human protection status. Today, Tom began, we signed the final agreements establishing the Galactic Emergency Response Force. The chamber's floating screen showed images from the past year. Humans rescuing alien colonists from storms, fighting fires in space stations, and diving into gas-giant atmospheres to save crashed ships. Each image represented what aliens had called impossible missions, accomplished by regular humans doing what they considered normal work. In the audience, Jack Stone sat next to Chief Researcher Brill, sharing what the aliens now called the legendary drink of courage, a cup of coffee. You know, Brill said quietly, we've had to rewrite every biology textbook in the galaxy. No one believed that life could evolve to be so durable. Jack smiled, remembering the science team's shock when they first visited Earth. How's that project going? The one about adapting human training methods. Remarkable results. Brill nodded. Just by copying your exercise routines, our species have grown 30% stronger. Though we still can't understand why humans do something called marathon running for fun. Commander Pete Roberts, sitting nearby, was showing a group of alien military officers videos from the new Joint Training Program. The footage showed alien soldiers, inspired by human examples, learning to operate in conditions they once thought lethal. The secret, Pete explained, is believing you can do it. Humans didn't know we were living on a death world. We just called it home and adapted. At the back of the chamber, Captain Mark Webber and his emergency response team were discussing rescue techniques with alien coordinators. The aliens had finally stopped flinching when Mark mentioned routine Earth disasters like tsunamis and earthquakes. The best part, Mark was saying, is how many of our methods can be adapted for other species. You may not be able to walk through fire like we do, but we can teach you to handle tougher conditions than you thought possible. Commander Anna Wells, now head of the new Galactic Rescue Operations, stood by a display showing the locations of human emergency teams throughout the galaxy. Every major colony world had requested a human presence after seeing their capabilities. We're expanding training centers, she explained to a group of interested aliens, starting with basic Earth-level disaster response and working up. Some species are already handling level 4 conditions. The council leader raised his hands for silence. 1 year ago, he announced, we thought these humans were primitive because they needed environmental suits to visit our worlds. Now we understand. They wore those suits to protect us from their strength, not to protect themselves from our conditions. Tom smiled at the irony. Today, he continued, we established something new in the galaxy. Not just emergency response, but a way to share human adaptability. We may have evolved on a HellWorld, but that just means we're better prepared to help others survive anywhere. The signing ceremony was brief. As the agreement was sealed, screens showed human teams across the galaxy celebrating. Some were having barbecues in radiation zones, others were swimming in lethal oceans, and one group was planning an expedition to explore an active volcano. For fun, the council leader approached Tom after the ceremony. There's one thing we still don't understand, he admitted. Your people face death world conditions every day, survive things we thought impossible, and treat it all as normal. How do you do it? Tom thought about his daughter, who had just won her school's extreme survival competition in the Australian outback. He thought about the weekend camping trips in dangerous weather that humans called refreshing. He thought about how his species had looked at one of the galaxy's deadliest planets and called it beautiful. That's simple, he replied with a smile. We're human. This is who we are. And somewhere on Earth, children were playing in the rain, climbers were scaling mountains, and emergency teams were training in conditions that would terrify most alien species. Just another normal day on humanity's beloved HellWorld.